Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection, where we come together each week to connect, whether you're here in person or you're joining us online. Everyone is welcome. We're going to begin today with our prayer of surrender and then read our devotion together. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. The title of today's devotion is Performance Proving Prerequisites. And here's our affirmation. If you have your book, we'll say it together. Today, I am aware that my self-worth and my worthiness are not dependent on my performance, proving myself, or satisfying any prerequisite. I am worthy right now, just as I am. So amen indeed. So the text begins, how do we operate in loving relationships if we do not feel as if we deserve to be loved? Sadly, no matter how passionately someone endeavors to love us, we can only receive love in direct proportion to how much we love ourselves. Okay, let's stop right here. Have you ever encountered someone like that? Someone you really want to love, whether it's in a romantic way or just a friend? Someone who you just keep pouring love into and doing things for and helping them out whenever they get in trouble. And they are just seemingly like this gigantic black hole of need. It's never enough. They can't get happy with themselves, and they're never really happy with you, no matter how much you do for them, because they have an emotional hole inside them that can never be filled by anyone else from the outside. Only they can fill it themselves from the inside. And no matter how much you try to build them up or give them compliments and encourage them, they still seem to be down on themselves and see themselves as not enough. There are many people out there like that. Believe me, I have encountered them. And you can't really have a normal, healthy loving relationship with them. It's exhausting even to try. They always leave you feeling drained. And that is a very helpless feeling when you love someone. So why are some people like that? And there, of course, are varying degrees. There's not everybody that has an issue with this is as extreme as I just described. But in the next paragraph, the text tells us some of the reasons why that cause this behavior in people. It says, perhaps we were raised with the skewed definition that love is about performance, proving, and prerequisites. Whether we perform beautifully, prove ourselves, or meet particular prerequisites is absolutely beside the point of love. Love is about worthiness and self-worth. Unfortunately, many religious adherents are burdened with generations of unworthiness teaching, and the unlearning of unworthiness can take a lifetime. All right, so what this is saying is if you sit in a pew Sunday after Sunday, listening to sermons about how sinful you are and in need of salvation, that your righteousness at its best is only filthy rags. If you've spent years being taught and believing that you are so unworthy, God can't even look at you, much less forgive you or love you unless it's through the blood that his son shed. That whole doctrine of Jesus saving us from God's wrath. If you sing songs your whole life that refer to yourself as a wretch, you're going to start believing it after a while. And before you can have a truly loving relationship on any level with someone else, you first got to unlearn some of that indoctrination and start loving yourself and seeing yourself as the divine being God created you to be. So this is how we do that. Last paragraph. We have to realize this. First, we are worthy of love because we come from a loving creator and from a loving space. Our behavior, successes, failures, strengths, weaknesses are a part of our human development, yet they do not factor into our worthiness of love. Okay, so time out again right here. All parents know that kind of love, whether you realize that's what it is or not. When you have a child, when it's first born, it's done nothing. It's not succeeded at anything or made good grades or shown you how well it can behave. Before any of that takes place, though, you as a parent love that child unconditionally with your whole heart, and you see it as worthy of your love just because it exists. So just because it's your child, it doesn't have to do anything to deserve your love. You just give it freely. Now, unfortunately, later on, sometimes our own indoctrination kicks in and we start basing maybe not our love, but our approval and acceptance of our children based on their performance or their behavior, because that's what we were taught. But it starts out as pure, unconditional love. And that's one of the challenges of life, to get back to that kind of innocent love, not only for our children, but for ourselves, for our own inner child as well. Because the truth is, that's how God loves us, no matter what anybody has told you to the contrary. Okay, back to the to the text. Second, our self-worth either invites or blocks love from finding its way into our lived experiences. When we love ourselves, not only do we attract the love of others, we tap into our capacity to love others or to love them back. The bottom line is this: we cannot give what we do not have to give. So that's common sense. If you don't have something, you can't give it to somebody else. Everything begins with you. If you want to have loving relationships in your life, you have to begin with the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. Once you get that self-love in order, then you have no problem loving others as well as attracting or accepting love from others. All right, so let's end this time of devotion together today with our prayer. Unconditional love. Today, I set my heart to love me, to be loved, and to love others. Help me to accept my worthiness. Amen. Amen. All right, now on to our connection affirmation today. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. Our teaching today is called Thieves in the Temple, which is also a song that was written by Prince. And we're going to go old school and start with a few quotes today. The first is by Anwar Sadat, who was a former president of Egypt. He said, "To damage the sovereignty of the individual is to replace a community inspired by love, benevolence, and beauty by another based solely on power." Okay, so that's very similar to what we just read in the devotion. Any doctrine or religion or belief system that damages the sovereignty of the individual, or in other words, messes with a person's own self-worthiness and ability to have true self-love, damages the whole community. Because you can't have a community, as it said, that's based on benevolence and love and beauty if all the individuals in that community don't have a healthy sense of self-worth and self-love and personal sovereignty. Then it becomes all about power in the absence of those things. Because, as we know, that saying, nature abhors a vacuum. So when there's not this loving, healthy presence, then what rushes in to fill that? People who want to have power over other people and control. All right, next quote. "Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains." Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was a famous French philosopher. So we're born free and innocent, like that baby I just spoke about. And then somehow, as life goes on, that unconditional love gets put in chains or replaced by the kind of love that is dependent on our performance or proving ourselves or prerequisites. Next, self-reverence, self-knowledge, self-control. These three alone lead to a life of sovereign power. Alfred Lord Tennyson. And let me just add here, I didn't have this written down, but again, that word sovereign. Okay, so if we truly believe we are made in the likeness and image of God, and we always say Jesus is king, or God is the king, God is supreme, God reigns supreme. Well, if we're in his image, don't you think we should have some sovereignty as well? So, which doesn't make any sense to be for preachers then to stand up in the pulpit and tell you how horrible you are. Anyway, I digress. Next quote is by Neil Donald Walsh. Be honest with yourself as to why you are choosing to do a particular thing. Then do it gladly, knowing that you are always getting to do what you want. The statement, I have no choice, is a lie. You can choose. You simply do not prefer the alternatives available to you for whatever reason. So you inevitably select the outcome you most prefer. Next by Dr. Wayne Dyer, live today. Let go of your attachment to your past as an excuse for your life conditions today. You are the product of the choices you are making right now. And as we'll see a little bit later on in the teaching, our whole collective culture and society is the product of people making those choices, and the choices they make the most is what sets what we call the consensus for how most people believe. Lastly, from Alan Cohen, and this is one of the truest statements I have ever heard. Love is heaven and fear is hell. Where you place your attention is where you will dwell. Okay, so Thieves in the Temple. Let's read some of the lyrics to that song, the same title that was written by Prince. It says, he says, love, come quick. Love, come in a hurry. There are thieves in the temple tonight. They don't care where they kick, just as long as they hurt you. There are thieves in the temple tonight. Love, if you're there, come save me from all this cold despair. I feel like I'm looking for my soul, like a poor man looking for gold. Love, come quick. Love, come in a hurry. There are thieves in the temple tonight. Okay, so that's not all of the lyrics, but those are the main ones I want to talk about. If we're looking for our soul, like a poor man looks for gold, then we first have to figure out why and how and where we have lost our souls. We'll get to that a little bit later. There's another old song. This one is not by Prince. It is an old church song called The World Didn't Give It to Me and the World Can't Take It Away. So according to Black gospel music's Shirley Caesar's version, it is This Joy I Have. According to white gospel music, the Gaither version, it's This Happy Face I'm Wearing. So there's two versions of that song, but they basically mean the same thing. So what is it that they're referring to there? What is it that we have that the world can't take away unless we allow it to? My answer to that would be what I was talking about, this personal sovereignty over ourselves, also known as the power of choice, free will. That was given to us by God, our Creator, thus not given to us by the world. It's a divine gift, and so the world can't take it away from us. We have to give it willingly. Sometimes we don't realize that's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So that personal sovereignty, that power of choice, free will, is the greatest power we possess as humans. But as the first song said, there are thieves in the temple. Not referring to a church building or other place of worship, but the temple of our body, specifically the temple of our consciousness. There are thieves trying to steal our personal sovereignty, our power to choose for ourselves the way we're going to live our lives, the way we will behave, and the things that we believe. We're going to talk today about who these thieves are and what their purpose is for wanting to take our power of choice away from us, which, as you can probably already guess, has to do with money and control. Now, time out here. When I keep referring and saying they, I think I've talked to you before about this concept that a lot of people out there believe that there's this group of people somewhere, and it goes by various names like Illuminati or Cabal or the reptiles, whatever. And, for all I know, that may be true. However, I don't think so. I tend to believe more like Dr. Christina Lopes, that this it's not a group of people that get together in a certain place every year and decide what's going to go on. It's just the culture that's been created by all these millions of people making personal decisions, that if they're not guided by love and this personal self-worthiness and like I said, if you don't love yourself, then the way you operate is through control. If you don't operate through love, that's your only other option, is to have power through control over others. And I think that maybe just so, when so many people in a culture are behaving this way rather than through love, then that's just what happens. So when I say they, I'm not talking about actual people who sit in a room and make decisions about who's going to war and all that. I'm just saying the concept of more people being kind of having to control their lives and other people through power and the money they have, their greed for that, because that's what fills them up, because they don't have that, they have that big hole that love is supposed to be in that's lacking. Okay, so these thieves are slick, okay? They don't walk up to us and put a gun to our heads and say, give me your power, give me your personal sovereignty, or I'm going to kill you, or else. No, they actually convince us, many times without our ever being aware of it, to freely give it up ourselves. So let's begin our investigation about these thieves by asking some questions. That's always a good place to start. First, who is deciding what reality is? And more importantly, why do we think it's more realistic to be negative and have low expectations than to be positive and expect the best? So this is a collective consensus of what we value. Okay, it's just a lot more people, for whatever reason these days, will tell you that they think life is hard, life is a struggle, than people who say, no, it's, you just find the flow and you go. So that's what we've become. So who has convinced us of this? Who has convinced us that life must be hard and that we have to struggle, and that struggle is required to have good things come to us? And the answer is twofold: our culture and our religion. And for most of us, the religion we were brought up in is Christianity, which says, again, not overtly sometimes, but sometimes overtly, it says, like, how the thought process is, how dare you believe you can come close to matching the vibration or the level of consciousness of a being of light and love like Jesus? Like, it's all, he's so far up here and we're just lowly wretches down here, and we can't make it through our daily life without him. All right, we'll talk about that later. Jesus, yes, I believe Jesus existed, but we have to kind of see him in a different light than Christianity has taught us. So we've discussed at some length before how the church, after it merged, we're talking about the historical church now, after it merged with the Roman Empire, okay, which used power to control its subjects, it guided us, it took on the agenda of the Roman Empire once it became a part of the Roman Empire. And it guided us much more often toward images of the very human, bloody, and tortured Jesus on the cross. It guided our attention over here rather than to the image of the glorious, transcendent, mystical Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. I did a whole teaching on that a couple of years ago. In both of these events in Jesus's life, the crucifixion and resurrection, which I'm going to count as one single event because it was a process, and then this other event that he had in his life of when he transformed into a being of pure light, and on the Mount of Transfiguration, where instantly the images of Moses and Elijah, two men who had been long dead, just appeared in front of Peter, James, and John with him. In both of these events, Jesus ascended or transcended, as it were, from being in his human form to being in a divine state. Now, the difference is, in one of these events, this was achieved the hard way, through physical death and torture and the shedding of blood as payment for sin. And the other way, the transfiguration, I'm not going to say easy, it was easier, because all it involved was a mental shift in his perception and his perspective. It was an acknowledgement in his mind that he was already divine and that all he had to do was walk out of or away from his flesh in order to achieve a divine level of consciousness. So during both of these events, he transcended his physical form. Okay, but one way was just a lot more difficult on him than the other. So as a part of that teaching, I also pointed out the fact that, in my opinion, if Peter, James, and John, that day that he took them up to the mountain and this thing happened where they saw him as a being of light and Moses and Elijah appeared, if they had accepted, if they had had the ability, if they knew that they had the same ability to transcend in that same manner he had, then I believe that the whole crucifixion and resurrection, the hard way, would have been unnecessary. But they didn't get it. They didn't grab it. They wanted, as I said in that teaching, they wanted to take that experience and bring it down into this 3D world of duality, because they said, let us build 3 temples. And he was like, no, you don't get it. It's not bringing that down here. It's us going up there. But because they didn't understand that, then he's like, okay, you can't get it the easy way, so I'm going to have to show you the hard way. So, and to me, that's what my brother always says, that's why he had to choose to speak their language at that time, which was the language of the shedding of blood and human sacrifice. So I said then, and I'll repeat now, that Jesus never said or taught this concept that the shedding of blood is necessary for the forgiveness or the remission of sin. That was all Moses and Abraham. Jesus wanted to show humanity a new way. He was all about a new way concerning everything that the religion of his day taught, but they did not understand it, at least not fully. They couldn't let go of that old way. So he had to do it the old hard way to convince them that they were reconciled to God and that they were worthy once and for all. All right, so that's how religion has convinced us that we are unworthy and that struggle, even to the point of shedding blood, is necessary in order for us to transcend into a higher way of living. Now we'll shift our focus to how our culture has convinced us of this. Our culture is largely deciding and dictating to us what reality is. And instead of us standing on and believing in the reality that we are divine beings who have come here to earth to have a temporary human experience, we are allowing the thieves in the temple to take that reality from us. Or more accurately, as I said earlier, we have allowed them to convince us to give that vision or that version of reality up, and we've let them replace it with a different version of reality. Let's go back now to the idea and concept of personal sovereignty, of the most precious possession, the gift of free will and the ability to make decisions for ourselves. Autonomy, actually our God-likeness, the ability to create, especially our own lives, is what makes us like God. So who or what are these thieves that we willingly give our power away to and thereby lose our personal sovereignty and diminish our own God-likeness? There are many. I'm only going to give you a few examples today. Now, before I give these examples, let me remind you that there are always 2 sides to every coin, and the things I will mention have their positive aspects as well as the negative ones that I'm going to talk about. But as everything here in this earthly realm of duality, we recognize both the good and the bad aspects of everything. But it's not the good and positive aspects of these things that are jeopardizing our personal sovereignty. It is the negative ones. So that's what I'm going to highlight today for the purpose of this teaching. In another teaching, I'll talk about their good sides, so I don't want anybody to be offended. The first thief of our personal sovereignty that I want to talk about is what's known as the world of academia, which is a little different than education. One of the definitions of education is an enlightening experience, and that's always good. Anytime you learn something new, that's a positive thing. But you can have an enlightening or an educational experience almost anywhere from almost anybody or any situation. Opportunities to learn new things are everywhere. Another definition, and interestingly, the first one that's listed in the dictionary, is the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or a university. So already that's closing it down to, no, you can't learn out there. You got to come sit in our classroom by the way learn the way we're telling you to learn. So that's a little more formal and closer to what I would consider academia, which is defined as the environment or community concerned with the pursuit of research, education, and scholarship. The difference, in my opinion, is that an emphasis on education is just that, learning or teaching in whatever way is best suited to the student. There are all kinds of ways people learn. We've talked about it before, the 7 basic ways, and I'm not going to take the time to go through them all. We've done it before. But each of us learns best through one of these styles of learning. Education takes this into consideration and focuses on what's best and most advantageous to the student. But the world of academia, however, is a different story. It has a different focus entirely. In that world, everything is centered around the teacher or the professor or the institution, and it's usually their way or the highway. In those settings, which I think unfortunately has become the majority of what our universities are now, how the student learns best is a secondary consideration. The teacher is motivated much more by what will advance his or her personal career and requires that each student and adjust their learning to their style of teaching rather than adjusting their style of teaching to the student's style of learning. In classes led by teachers like this, the student's greatest education is, how do I please this instructor in order to get a passing grade? Or how do I give this professor what he or she wants in a manner that he or she wants it so that I can get the grade I want to get? So this is a system that teaches students how to conform and manipulate more than anything else. So you're not really getting an education about the subject, you're getting an education on how do I change myself in order to please this person so I can eventually manipulate the grade I want to get. So, kids are born wanting to be honest. Kids are born wanting to tell the truth. But very soon we teach them that doesn't always get them very far. No matter how much we give lip service to the statement, honesty is the best policy, we don't really believe that because so often they find themselves being punished for being honest, for telling the truth, and for not conforming to what the teacher or their parents want them to do in the way they want them to do it. Some years ago, Larry Riley, a member here, told me a funny story about his then 4-year-old son. He said his son came downstairs one morning and Larry noticed he had a different pair of pajama pants on than he had when he was put to bed. And so he said, "What's up, Trey? Why did you change your pajama pants? Did you wet the bed?" Because that was an issue he'd been having at the time. And Trey said, "I didn't change my pajama pants, Daddy." And Larry asked again, "Trey, did you wet the bed?" And again, the answer was no. But upon inspection, which is exactly what Larry suspected, the bed was wet. So then he said, "Trey, did you lie to me?" And then his son gave him the simplest, most honest answer. He said, "Yes." And so then his dad said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I didn't want you to know." And so, simple. Okay, because I didn't want you to know, so I lied. So then, of course, Larry had to stifle his own laughter. So fortunately, Trey, as most 4-year-olds do, outgrew his bedwetting phase. But unfortunately, most kids also outgrow the tendency just to be honest, just to tell the truth. In fact, he already had. At 4 years old, he had already lied to his dad twice before the truth finally came out. He said he didn't change his pajamas, which he obviously had, and that he hadn't wet the bed, which he obviously had. So any child that stays in a system long enough where their honesty only gets them punished, and I'm not saying that's what Larry did. This is not a commentary on his parenting. It's a commentary on the system where kids learn pretty early that it's better for them to just do it the teacher's way or mama and daddy's way. Even if it's fundamentally going against what they feel is best for them, okay? Where they intuit, their fundamental nature. They learn this so they can stay out of trouble or so they can get what they need, which goes right back to that system of either reward for doing what we're told, or punishment for not doing what we're told. Although it's very subtle, that is one of the thieves of our personal sovereignty, this worship we have of academia and the importance we place on college degrees. Even though in that system, in my opinion, most of the time, there's not enough latitude given to the students, who the whole thing's supposed to be for, to question the status quo. They're not encouraged to question. They're encouraged to go sit for 4 years, do what you're told, get your piece of paper, and then go on with your life. So, am I anti-college, anti-degrees? No, of course not. But I also know they are not the end-all, be-all of life, and or even of what a true education is, because of this process you have to go through in order to get them. Education should be about teaching people, children in particular, how to think, not what to think. It should be more than just memorize these things and learn how to write this paper in the way I want you to write it, or give a presentation in the way I say is right. The difference between education and academia is a lot like the difference we talk about between religion and spirituality. In fact, you probably noticed that I just used the same phrase that my brother always uses to describe the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion tells you what to think. Spirituality teaches you how to think. Okay, so education in its pure form teaches you how to learn, whereas this world of academia that we have put so high up on a pedestal really only teaches you what to learn. All right. When we make a religion of education by teaching people what to learn instead of how to learn, then it becomes just that, a religion, the religion of academia, to which many people give their power away. All right, second thief, closely related to the first one, the medical establishment. I love doctors. I love doctors. They are necessary. However, again, there is a certain segment of society that has made a religion out of medicine rather than what it's actually called, a practice. It's called a practice for a reason. During the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, there was very little actual medicine and science, okay? People largely depended on superstition and prayer when it came to maintaining their health. But when the pendulum swung away from that, it swung too far, and it's never come back to the middle. Just like people used to unquestioningly, and some still do, follow pastors or priests or whoever they used to follow in those days, oracles, spiritual leaders. Now, some people have just replaced that with doctors, and they act as if they cannot not ever be questioned. But we should no more blindly follow doctors than we blindly follow pastors. Should we trust that in either case, both for doctors and pastors, that they are people who have studied to show themselves approved in their respective fields and know more about we do than certain subjects? Yes. But ultimately, you know your body better than anyone else. And if anyone tells you to do something or to proceed with a treatment that's not resonating with you, no matter how many letters they have after their name, you should probably pause for just a second. It's okay to get a second opinion or a third opinion or a fourth, however many you have to get until you find something that really resonates with your own spirit of, yes, I think that's going to work for me. We have become a pill and medication obsessed culture, to say the least. Modern medicine has done great things to advance how we care for ourselves, and it's given us options that previous generations never dreamed of. But now it's almost like we think pills and surgery and other treatments can cure anything. And so we don't even try to address whatever the issue is in any other way first, such as diet and exercise, or looking at how our emotions are contributing to whatever may be wrong with us. We just go to the doctor and accept whatever he or she tells us without question, and then we get the prescription and we go get the pills and we take them, many of which only give us more symptoms for which we have to have another medication. And it becomes this vicious and very expensive cycle, which, let's go back now to what I said. What is the other option to a loving, self-worthy community. It's power, control, and money. So when we give all of our power away to a doctor instead of considering them a helpful partner in our health care, then we rob ourselves of our personal sovereignty, even over our own body. Third and final thief I'll discuss today, and this one is more insidious to me than the first two put together, and it is social media, which no matter what age you are, you get sucked into. Sometimes we think of social media addiction as a problem for only young people because we didn't grow up with it, but that's not true. We can get sucked in just like they can. I watched a documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which, although heartbreaking and sobering and frightening, I would highly recommend that you see if you haven't seen it. I also read an article on the same topic, which I'll quote from as well, and it's called A Practical Guide to Taking Back Your Power from Social Media by Asaf Hanukkah. So one of the questions I said we'd focus on today is who is deciding what our reality is? And the answer to that presently is most definitely the content creators of social media. Social media, no matter what it started out to be, has become the biggest thief there is of our personal sovereignty. And the irony that I'm communicating to some of you through social media today is not lost on me. But as I stated in the beginning, everything I talk about today has its upside, its positives, as well as its negatives. And we need to take a look just for a moment at the other side so we can understand the magnitude of what has happened over the last few decades, the last 10 years in particular. We'll start with the article and then go into the documentary, and I'll intersperse my comments throughout. Said tech companies, especially companies that are incentivized by maximizing your attention, such as Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, etc., are prioritizing their agenda over your mental health by covertly manipulating your choices and altering your behavior. Most people vastly underestimate the ways tech companies have infiltrated our lives without us even knowing it. Everyone has had the experience of logging on to social media to do something specific, then waking up an hour later wondering where the time went. That's the opposite of choice or personal sovereignty. That's you being manipulated by an algorithm optimized to have you spend as much time as possible on their platform. You might think you decide, and you might even think you program the algorithm with your choices. But in reality, there are powerful supercomputers working to hook you into going down rabbit holes, all the while making you think it's what you want. All right, companies like Google and Facebook are some of the wealthiest and most successful of all time. They have relatively few employees. They just have a giant computer that rakes in money. So the question is, how are they doing this? Who is paying them and for what? Those are really important questions. During the first 50 years of Silicon Valley, the industry produced products like hardware and software and sold them to customers. It was nice, simple, straightforward business. In contrast, for the last 10 years, the biggest companies in the business have been in the business of selling their users. Because the public doesn't pay for the products like Facebook and Twitter and other social media, it's the advertisers who pay for them. Therefore, the advertisers are the customer, and we're the thing being sold. There's a classic saying, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. A lot of people think Google is just a search engine and Facebook is just a place to keep up with friends. But what they don't realize is that the various advertisers who are paying for it all and who are the customers of these companies are competing for your attention. And so their business model is to keep people engaged with the screen for as long as they can. Their goal is to figure out how to get as much of a person's attention as is possible. The thought process is, how much time can we get you to spend? And how much of your life can we get you to give up to us? Okay, think about that statement. Like I said earlier, we are just handing our power to them when we do this. it can be a noble thing or to give or even give up something, just like Jesus did. But it should be your choice what you're giving up and how much of it, just like it was Jesus's choice. Then it talks about how the question, not the question, how the generation who are now in their 20s, maybe early 30s, is the first to have had access to social media during the turbulent years of middle school, and how that has affected the way they view and how they experience relationships and their connection to others in a way that it did not affect those of us who didn't grow up during that formative time of our life, with every aspect of our life being broadcast on the internet. So, and more importantly, how all of this is being paid for by advertisers. Okay, so remember our devotion today. Having so much access to technology and social media at a young and formative age means that it's kind of messing with kids' self-esteem. Okay, I've read all these studies that especially girls, teenage girls who spend a lot of time on social media, the rate of suicide skyrocketed because they had so much to compare and the images they were seeing that they were trying to compare themselves to were so far from reality that they couldn't handle it because they weren't mature enough to know that's a picture that's been photoshopped, or that's not real. That's not what even matters in your real life. They've not been taught it's the inside that matters, like maybe a lot of us before social media were taught by our teachers and our parents and our church that, it's your heart that matters most. They weren't taught that. That's not what was emphasized. It was all this outer beauty, which if they didn't have, they felt like life was no longer worth living. All right. So in this world that's been created by social media, anytime two people connect, the only way it's financed is through a sneaky, imperceptible third party, the social media platform, who's paying money to manipulate those two people. So we've created globally an entire generation who were raised in a context where the very meaning of communication in their culture is based on manipulation. We've put deceit and sneakiness at the absolute center of all our connection and interaction with others. When you think about how these companies work, it starts to make sense. There are all these services on the internet that we think of as free, but they're not. They're paid for by advertisers. So this makes me think of it's kind of got a parallel to that concept of there's no that concept we just talked about, that Abraham and Moses said there's no forgiveness for sins without the shedding of blood. It's this whole attitude of somebody's got to pay. It's like, and that's the whole reason a lot of people want to believe in hell, because when bad things happen to them, they say somebody's got to pay for that. Somebody's got to go to hell. Somebody's got to be punished. But that is a very earthly, human, dualistic, that's based on a dualistic consciousness and way of thinking. When Jesus shed his blood, it was, number one, by his choice, and number two, it was freely given. Nothing was expected in exchange. That's a higher consciousness that's based in love. This whole nobody gets a free lunch attitude, that process is not based in love. All right, back to the documentary. Why do advertisers pay those companies? They pay them money in exchange for showing their ads to us. We're the product, or rather our attention that Facebook is selling to the advertisers in exchange for money is the product. Or said another way, what's being sold is the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your behavior and perception. That is the product. Their goal is to change how you think, which changes who you are, which changes what you do. And that's the ultimate goal, controlling what we do so that they also control what we spend our money on. The reason it works so well and on such a grand scale is because it is so gradual and imperceptible. Okay, just like that story of the frog in the kettle of water. When the frog first gets in there, it's very comfortable. It's like, oh, he's splashing around in the lukewarm water. Well, but then as that heat gets turned up and it starts, he's dead before he even realizes what happened to him. It's too late. So the next thing they talk about is how these platforms should be thought of as tools for us to use. So we've talked before about this concept of how it relates to our minds. We should only use our minds as tools to help us. We should never become slaves to our thoughts, okay? And so in that same vein, we should learn how to use technology as a tool to help us and not become its slave. No one got upset when bicycles were invented. Okay, nobody said, oh my God, we've just ruined society. These bicycles are negatively affecting us. They're pulling people away from spending time with their kids. They're ruining the fabric of our democracy. People can no longer tell what's true and what's not true. None of this was ever said about a bicycle, because when something is a tool, it's genuinely just sitting there waiting with no agenda of its own for you to use it when you need it. But that's not what technology has become. When a thing ceases being just a tool, when it begins demanding things from you, like your attention, like your interaction, when it begins seducing and manipulating you, then it's not a tool anymore. We've moved away from having a tool-based technology environment where we use it for our own purposes as we find it necessary, to an addiction and manipulation-based technology environment. That's what's changed. Social media is no longer just a tool sitting there waiting to be used. It has its own goals, which are always based on making money for its true customers, the advertisers. And in order to do this effectively, it uses your own psychology against you. The article says, what I want people to know is that everything you're doing online is being watched, is being tracked, is being measured. Every single action you take, every click is being carefully monitored and recorded down to exactly what images you stop and look at and how long you look at it. This way, they know when people are lonely. They know when people are depressed. They know when people are looking at photos of their ex-romantic partners. They know what you're looking at late at night and first thing in the morning. They know whether you're an introvert or an extrovert and what kind of neuroses you have. They know what frightens you. And believe me, they take advantage of it. They now have more information about all of us than has ever been imagined in human history. It is unprecedented. And my question is, what are they doing with it? What are they using it for? Are they using it for our own good to help us evolve? No, absolutely not. It's not to their benefit. It is to their benefit to keep us angry and sad and frightened as much of the time as they can, because that gives them, and again, I'm not talking about a specific group of people, but just this thing that's been created, this entity, the power. And it allows them to sell us more stuff that we think will make us feel better. But guess what? If we already know who we are and we have that self-worth, we know we don't really need it. All right. So this was confirmed by one of the guys being interviewed when a cameraman during this interview made a comment. He said, "You're making me feel like a lab rat." And the man answered and said, "That's because you are. We all are. But it's not like we're lab rats in pursuit of developing a cure for cancer. It's not like these companies are in any way trying to benefit us or to further the evolution of mankind for the good. We're just the zombies that they want and need to show more ads to so they can make more money." Wow. So that's sobering. Stop and think about that the next time you're endlessly scrolling rather than, and I have to do, I take a self-case of this. Sometimes it's like, I'm just like, what am I doing? It's like, there's so many other things I could be doing that would be better for my mental health than this. But it's so easy to get caught up in. Okay, the last area we'll talk about concerning social media is how it has changed our perception of reality by this hyper customization that we are directed to see. Okay, we talk a lot about, so whoever effectively controls what we see shapes our perception or reality. We talk a lot about the good side of creating our own reality. So when we give our power away, though, then our reality is created for us, okay, by these other people. Creating your own reality. It has a good side and it has a bad side. For example, When you go to Google and type in, what is climate change? You're going to see different results depending on where you live. Did any of you know that? I didn't until I read this. In certain cities, you'll get the information that climate change is a hoax. In others, you'll get the answer, climate change is disrupting the planet or causing the destruction of nature. Getting different answers based on your location is a function not of what the truth is, but about where you're Googling from, as well as the particular things Google already knows about your interests. Even two friends who are close to each other emotionally as well as geographically, may even have the same exact set of friends, can have very different social media experiences. You may think you're seeing basically the same updates as everyone else, but it's not like that at all. Each different user sees a completely different social media world because each user's customized experience is based on these computers deciding what is perfect for each of them. Each person has access to their own reality with their own set of facts. When we all begin to operate on a different set of facts, we lose our ability to reckon with or consume any information that contradicts the worldview that's been created by those facts, which means we also lose our ability to be objective, to be constructive, and to think critically. All right, so time out. So a constant question that's being asked right now is, how did we as a nation and how did we as a world get so polarized? Well, here's your answer. You assume people that are on the other side from you who disagree with you are just stupid or prejudiced or whatever, because how could they not come to the same conclusions as you or at least understand your point of view when they're seeing the same information as you? But that's the whole point. They're not seeing the same information as you. Choose one cable news network and watch it exclusively for a month without flipping to another channel, and you'll see what I mean. We're not all working with the same information, and that's been done on purpose. We've all been driven further and further away from the center, away from the middle way where we can find common ground and compromise with each other. We've all been driven to this one extreme over here or this other extreme over here. And the bottom line is we now have less and less control over who we really are and what we believe as a result. So let's think about this for a minute. The battle is for our focus and for our attention because, as we know, our attention and focus are very powerful. The reason advertisers pay a lot of money to purchase our attention and focus is because they know how valuable it is. So we've got to stop giving something that's that valuable to ourselves away to the thieves. We are each responsible for what we focus on and give our attention to, as we are for the words that come out of our mouths. The key is taking back that responsibility. That's how we also take our power back, because that's where the power is, in choosing through our personal sovereignty what we're going to focus our attention on. As one of our quotes said, love is heaven, fear is hell, and what we focus on is where we will dwell. My brother preached a sermon once called "Watch Your Mind, Watch Your Mouth," in which he talked about how at the end of the story of David and Goliath, David used Goliath's own sword to cut his head off. The very weapon that was meant to be used to kill David was used by David to kill his enemy. So the same is true in our lives, or can be if we choose for it to be. The thing you thought came to kill you or to steal your power only came to make you stronger if you choose for it to make you stronger. The thing that once threatened you to take your power away now becomes the wisdom that protects you in your next season of life. The focus and attention, the power we've been giving away to these various thieves in the temple of our consciousness, that if we continue giving away, will be the sword that destroys us, is the very same sword that can become our protection and our strength when we remember that we are the ones in charge of our own lives And we can determine to use all of these things as tools for our own divine unfolding, our own evolution, and our own growth. They are our tools, not our masters. Amen? Amen. Mom, if you'll come, we're going to sing our song, end with it. Yeah, that's great. I love that. That was a little that was heavy on information that maybe not interest everybody, but I thought it was so interesting to even look at the fact that sometimes we don't even realize why we don't feel worthy, why we feel helpless. It's because slowly, imperceptibly, we're giving our power away. That's why it's so important to every day remind yourself who you are, that you are the divine image of God in his likeness, and you have the same power to create as he does. He gave that to you. Don't give it away. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say amen. Have a great week. Be at peace. I love you. Goodbye.